Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast, this early week edition. I'm Josh Norris. That's John Daigle. That's RotoPat.
We had to re-rack, and so now we're recording this a second time.
We had an off-the-rails beginning of the podcast.
It was super lively. People missed out on it.
2 to 3 minute debate.
Of just yelling at each other about Pat's name.
Whenever I screw up your name, it's like the biggest insult you've ever felt in your life. What happens? Okay,
we've been working together 5-6 years.
Yeah, but I only see you like once every 5 weeks.
You say my name many times per week.
Okay, what if you go to the doctor's office, somewhere where they have to read your name, and they say Doherty or Doherty? Do you stop the world and say, hey, no, we need to fix this because you are insulting me right now?
Without fail, they always say Doherty. But you know, this is my career. This is my life.
Okay.
I'm going on the podcast. I need my name said correctly. The doctor's office, you know, I don't really care if Dr. Dankner.
You know what you could do for everyone else? You could just change the spelling of your last name to make it easier. You could do D-A-R-D-Y.
Does it have approximately 5 too many letters?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I try to pronounce and enunciate every single letter because that's how people speak.
When I tell people how to pronounce it, I say D-A-R-D-E-E, and you just say it as fast as possible. Darty.
Okay.
Because if you think about it,
no, I think you mispronounced it right there, Pat.
No, I didn't.
I think you did. Put a U in there.
If you think about my last name too much, you will say it incorrectly. So you just kind of got to fire it off like it's an impulse, like it's a take.
It's Patrick Bennett Darty,
yes,
right?
Of course, yes. No, my middle name is Bennett. Thank you, Josh.
All right, let's move on to more football stuff. Again, if you missed the other day's podcast, yesterday's podcast, it's a roundup, whip around of every single game of the weekend. It was a wild Week 10. So go back and listen to that if you missed any prime performances, sterling games, surprises out there. Go back and enjoy that whip around. This is a big view podcast that we like to do every Monday, you know, because we are podcasting twice in less than 12 hours. So why don't we look at some big picture thoughts here? Daigle, you want to talk about this Rams offense that has been struggling as we've gone on, and especially yesterday, a loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, a loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers that really resulted in us watching that game and asking, what the hell is this Rams offense, honestly? Because they lack an identity. And I think it begins with the offensive line. They lost 2 more guys yesterday, and their starting center and right tackle, and Rob Havenstein and Brian Allen, and they replaced them with no names, and Austin Corbett, who couldn't even cut it with the Browns, and then someone called, I can't even remember his name, but it definitely has quotations around his name because he may not exist. But no, the fact is that they just are not what we have seen in the past. They look more like their Super Bowl offense every single outing, which is not good, by the way. They aren't throwing to the running back, still bottom 2 in running back target rates, which used to be what they...
It was a staple.
Yes, exactly, especially to Todd Gurley. But now Todd Gurley looks more like a paddle boat when he turns sideways. It takes him a whole day to get to the sideline. Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown, they are breaking tackles, but does it really matter whenever your offensive line is that atrocious? And so you lack all juice. And I'm just not sure what to do, not only for the rest of this season, as they're now 5-4 and 3rd in their division, because they obviously play behind the 49ers and Seahawks, but moving forward, I mean, we have Jared Goff's contract on the books for $134 million, and perhaps they shed it this offseason, but either way, they made that deal. You have Todd Gurley's contract that reset the market until Zeke was signed. You have Brandon Cook's contract that I believe is $81 million in total. And then you have Jalen Ramsey, who you traded for, who I assume you traded because you're going to give him a top cornerback contract.
Reuniting him with Blake Bortles.
And not to mention Aaron Donald. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, in the Rams' identity, you couldn't have laid it out better than you. Their identity is the worst identity you could have in the NFL. When you become identified with your problems, like that's when your team is going in the wrong direction. And the Rams right now, their identity is their problems. You said the offensive line, it starts with the offensive line.
So poor.
But that's not the only bad offensive line in the NFL. When you're a quarterback.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, when you're a quarterback and you start having to alibi away everything, Jared Goff, any quarterback that gets drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds could succeed probably in a perfect situation. But you're not going to have perfect situations most of the time. Jared Goff had a perfect situation the first basically 18 months under Sean McVay. Started going sideways after Todd Gurley got hurt last season. And what we're seeing is a quarterback completely incapable of creating offense on his own.
I think you laid it out perfectly, Pat. That is absolutely the point you should make because it was a perfect situation to succeed. And I talk about this all the time. I feel like I talk about it every single week. But it was difficult to isolate Jared Goff in that system because He is so good at hitting his back foot, recognizing either in his ear when Sean McVay is talking to him before 18 seconds, 20 seconds left is on the play clock, or recognizing at post-snap where to throw the football to, and he can deliver in those moments. But when he has to win outside of structure, when he has to win inside of chaos, that has never been his strong suit. And Pat, I don't know if he's necessarily worse this year against pressure. I keep going back to he's just being pressured far more often. But you look at quarterbacks that have had to deal with bad pockets, bad offensive lines throughout the league. Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins in 2018 had to deal with this. I mean, I can go name after name after name. And Jared Goff just isn't that style of quarterback. Yet, the Rams looked at it and said, it's okay, we understand, because I'm sure they know who he is. Like, they can probably self-evaluate, but we're still going to tie ourselves to him. And I don't know, unless they spend all offseason trying to reinvent this offensive line that might be without Andrew Whitworth heading into 2020, if they can really rebound. And I'm a little afraid, John, if this window to win is already closed here for the Rams.
If they self-evaluated, though, they don't give him $120 million guaranteed, right? Because that was only last month.
They self-evaluated and found absolute belief in Sean McVay. That's what they found. This guy can overcome any problem. And
it might be too much, though. And per Chase Stewart on Twitter, a great follow, Jared Goff's last 16 games now that we have it on the books, 4,250 yards, 17 touchdowns, 32 total turnovers, and 5.75 adjusted yards per attempt. It is absolutely brutal.
That is inconceivable. So you mentioned all the bad contracts. I tweeted a poll yesterday where the choices were
That's where I got this idea.
The Goff contract, the Gurley contract, or the Cooks contract.
Yeah, they're all bad.
They're all bad. The Goff one is winning. There's still time to vote. Actually,
Brandon Cooks is a top 7 paid wide receiver in the NFL right now. And this isn't even thinking about the concussion history, the health aspect, but they can't get out of that contract, I believe, until 2021. So he's tied to them for next season. I mean,
the Rams overinvested in Sean McVay's genius, because Sean McVay, when the summer before he even played for the Rams, Brandon Cooks, Sean McVay was just talking about how much he loved Brandon Cooks, how much they could do with him. Yeah. I think Sean McVay maybe just kind of bit off more than he can chew. Even one of the best coaches in the NFL, which he is, can bite off more than they can chew.
And I know a lot of quarterbacks have dealt with bad pockets, but it still comes back to what were they thinking in the offseason whenever you have this zone stretching scheme that truly relies on your offensive line, and you did nothing to address it.
But how many teams have we seen that have a productive quarterback move away from him and go into a different direction willfully, because they want they believe that they're a forward-thinking organization? I don't think we've truly seen one team do that. We thought it was going to be Mr. Harbaugh and Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith a couple years ago. We thought maybe it could have been Sean McVay and Jared Goff, but no team has taken that step so far, and so I think it's a very difficult situation to ask a team to be the first ones to do that.
And I guess they have done it incorrectly anyhow, because they have proven their system of building is top-heavy, which, as we know, like Bill Parcells, one of the greatest GMs of all time, always worried more about the 53rd man on your roster as opposed to just stacking the front.
It's such an interesting concept about like the first post-quarterback franchise. The Redskins kind of did it.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have much of a backup.
That's gone well.
Yeah.
I also thought that within that organization, they thought Alex Smith was a better player than Kirk Cousins. And they were, in fact, I have heard this, they thought that Alex Smith would test vertically more often than Kirk Cousins did.
Interesting.
And again, health reasons came into this equation, but that certainly wasn't the case his first year there. And the Rams are outside looking in the playoffs right now. Like, it's a very strong chance they don't make the playoffs. They have the Bears coming up, the Ravens coming up, the Cardinals twice, and outside of the Cardinals, it's the Seahawks, it's the Cowboys, and it's the 49ers to close out this season. It's not looking good, because there are aspects, and we'll get into this later on the show, there are parts of teams that can improve as the season goes along. I rarely think that can be the offensive line. In fact, you've seen it for multiple seasons, multiple contenders for the Super Bowl. A healthy and offensive line that has played together is a cheat code once you get to the playoffs, and the Rams certainly aren't that this year.
No, it's sad.
Fair.
No,
you want to take it away for the next topic? Well, that was me doing this. That was
a transition.
Yes.
Well, I want to talk about the hashtag changing face of the Cardinals offense. You think, was that worthy of a hashtag?
No, but I feel like that is something that you lean on quite often.
Have we discussed before, you think in Twitter?
Listen, people, I'm a careerist, and I think hashtag humor is going to come back around.
Okay. So this is like 70s fashion.
This is like I'm taking the long view.
Right.
And,
Got it.
I'm all in on hashtag humor.
Hashtags and bell bottoms will be coming back around at some point.
Yes, I'm wearing bell bottoms.
And proper pronunciation of names.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, I'm just a huge stickler for pronunciation of names. Unless it's anyone but you, then I don't really care. But when it's you, I really care. But the Cardinals, so that's what struck me yesterday. I watched the Cardinals game. You, more than a lot of people, I've heard you praise, rightfully so, the Cardinals running game, how creative and amazing Cliff Kingsbury's running game has been. But now with the running back injuries, with kind of what could be a 3-man committee soon, we're seeing this go from what was a very effective run-first offense to now kind of more what I was expecting heading into the season, an aggressive, effective, maybe vertical-ish passing offense. And we're seeing, I don't know what is necessarily driving this change beyond the running back injuries, which is an obvious part, but if you could isolate anything, it's maybe Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella finally making plays down the field. Christian Kirk, on the year, his slot percentage is still 65%, but it's under 20 each the past 2 weeks. He caught a 69-yard touchdown in stride down the sideline yesterday, and they're just going more vertically minded. I think even with as good as the run offense had been, becoming a much better offense by adding these new explosive elements.
I don't know if your concerns are warranted here, Pat, because...
I'm not concerns. I'm saying this is good.
Oh, okay.
This is very good, in my opinion.
Because I think for a while they did have to lean on the running game, like 266 yards against the Bengals, 156 yards against the Giants, 253 yards against the 49ers in that Thursday night performance. I mean, they didn't run the ball well against really good defenses against the run, like the Saints and the Bucks. I think part of it, again, an over-top look here of the Cardinals, is the coaching, at least offensively, I think has been sound this year because they've kind of reinvented themselves in different portions of the season. Like you look early, that first week against the Detroit Lions, Kyler Murray had an awful first half and then took it under his wing in the second half. Then they go and run these awesome, despite an awful offensive line, awesome runs to the edge and to the outside of defenses. And now you see Kyler, again, being the forefront of this offense where he is able to hit more targets like Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella down the field. That speaks to good coaching, and hopefully a good roster supplements that coaching at some point, and that's not going to happen here in a 3-game losing streak in 2019.
And it's unfortunate that their rushing game has essentially disappeared in all of this. Perhaps
has it? I mean, I don't think it has.
It kind of has, but I'd say it's injured.
They had 153 yards against the 49ers a week and a half ago.
But okay, so maybe I'm just too focused on David Johnson looking very bad. Not just injured this past week, even though he played. He looked not so healthy before that as well.
Right.
Among 58 guys with 30 carries this year, David Johnson ranks 55th in yards after contact per attempt. He's just not breaking tackles. James White, John Hilliman, and Kalen Ballage, the infamous Kalen Ballage, by the way. The only other guy's worse at breaking tackles.
The only guy who got the tanking memo, I should say.
And it's credit to...
Literally ducks out of the way of targets.
All of it, most of the credit goes to Kingsbury, especially because at Texas Tech he was able to mask his poor offensive line. Right. He's done that again this year. They're 12th in adjusted line yards. But they still need more explosive. And like I said, Chase Edmonds could actually bring more to the table if he comes back healthy. But also they have another game against the Niners. It's not a short turnaround, so you're probably mismatched in that one.
From a fantasy perspective, it's very frustrating, right? Because we won't know who to play in this backfield. So there's an element of frustration there. But more so, I'm just concerned of what this team's going to look like in 2020. Because if they do well enough this season, can a team president really fire a general manager, one who helped hire a head coach?
There is a way. There is a recipe.
Okay.
And that recipe is a power struggle. And if Cliff Kingsbury is an ascendant coach over the second half of the season, assumes more power in the front office, that's the only way you really...
So we basically have to assume that Cliff and Steve Keim don't get along.
Yeah, we have to assume...
Because it's not like Steve Keim has been a crystal clean member of the Arizona Cardinals organization over the last 3 or 4 years. And if he's already gotten over that hump, it kind of makes you think that he's going to be a part of this organization no matter what.
Yeah, so the only way, to dislodge someone like that is a power struggle. And that seems kind of unlikely. This is Cliff Kingsbury's first year in the NFL in this capacity. It was on practice squads, basically. It's week 10 real quick. Do you guys want to hear some overpraise, maybe?
Yeah.
I was going to say, the Cardinals have been almost Patriots or Kyle Shanahan-esque in the way they've established multiple ways to win on offense. Of course, they've only won, I believe, 3 games, right? But it's pretty unique for like a first-time coach, a rookie quarterback, to put like almost two entirely different blueprints out there like the Cardinals have done this year.
And we look across the league and we talk about rookie quarterbacks, we talk about second-year quarterbacks that have just their moments, and a lot of their negative moments are turning the football over. Kyler Murray's not turning the football over. Sure, they had 2 turnovers this past weekend, but that was the first turnovers for the team since week 5 of this NFL season.
Trent Sherfield fell. I'm going to blame it on him, even though it was not a good throw.
But we did get a season high in stats from Andy Isabella, so it's fine. Everything's positive now.
Trending in the right direction.
I think we have seen enough from Kyler to be in on him. 100% in on him.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's been a problem for me, being 100% in on Kyler Murray.
You were like that since he stepped on stage at the NFL draft.
I was, yes.
I think you have him on every single fantasy team.
I do.
I want to talk about, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, parts of teams that have drastically changed throughout the year, because I think too often we look at this and say, hey, we're 10 weeks into the season. Really, the NFL year is made up of like four-week seasons, and you can change a team injuries, play, cohesion in 4-week increments. And I don't think a team has really changed their identity more this year than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because you look at those first 2 weeks of the season, Ben Roethlisberger goes down, Mason Rudolph steps in. They are absolutely awful on defense despite investing a lot there. Then they make the trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And at the time, I believe they were 0-2. And they trade a first-round pick. It's not like they go out and start winning football games after that immediately though. But what has changed is how good Minkah Fitzpatrick has made that defense. But along with TJ Watt playing at like an all-pro level, Bud Dupree's in a contract year playing very well, Cam Hayward is playing very well. This is the turnovers, and Greg Rosenthal pointed out, since Minkah Fitzpatrick has taken over kind of like that center field, that deep portion of the field, 5 turnovers in a week, 2 turnovers, 3 turnovers, 3, 4, 3, and 4. It's difficult for turnovers to be sticky year to year, but from week 3 until week 17, I think this can last because we saw it last year with the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I was saying the Steelers, I don't know what the updated DVOA ratings are, but the Steelers on Pro Football Focus actually have the highest team defensive grade, higher than the Patriots, higher than the 49ers. And I mean, they've gone so defensive heavy. They won a game with Devlin Hodges at quarterback.
Who's looked better than Mason Rudolph.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think both are just below quality.
Okay, that's fair. And Mason Rudolph hasn't been good.
To go full narrative, I think maybe we're seeing, people like analysts have always had a tough time like understanding Mike Tomlin. Why are the Steelers so devoted to Mike Tomlin? And to go full like 50-year-old columnist, analyst dad, I mean, look how hard this team is playing for Mike Tomlin.
They've won 4 straight.
Yeah, and and to like adjust on the fly like that, they had to completely change their identity on the fly.
I mean, in fact, after that 3-game losing streak to start the season, they won against the Bengals. They went to overtime and a loss to the Ravens. Then they won 4 straight after that. Right now, I mean, if the season ended today, and it doesn't, we still have basically half the season to go, the Steelers will be in the playoffs, which is crazy to think about where this team was to start the year, how different they're going to be, how bad their offense still is, how James Conner's on the bench. It's kind of amazing how well they're playing, and a lot of it is obviously defensive focused.
A lot of it is their defense. However, I still, even hindsight, I wish it were top 5 protected. And I know perhaps they don't get a player as good as Minkah Fitzpatrick is playing within the top 6 or top 8 of the draft if the pick falls that way. I still think it was a bad business move, though. 2
more portions of teams that I want to talk about. The Ravens secondary. Because this was another one where Earl Thomas in the first couple weeks looked slow. He looked lethargic. He was getting beat vertically. They made a trade for Marcus Peters, and he's PFF's 3rd-rated cornerback in the league right now. He has 2 pick sixes since joining the Ravens. Marlon Humphrey is back and he's healthy. Jimmy Smith has added some elements. And what's that allowing them to do with a talented secondary? Sometimes when you have such a good offense, one good position group, you can then get creative in other elements. And that's allowing Doc Martindale up front to be creative with his blitzes, to be awesome, creating pressure on opponents, not by individual efforts, but like a unit up there that's a front 6 or a front 7, and then just allowing a secondary to be great in the back end. Playmakers in the back half allow you to be creative up front. And this is making the Ravens one of the more obviously entertaining and competitive and well-rounded teams in the league.
And that one made more sense from the beginning anyways, the moment they pulled the trigger, because that allowed Jimmy Smith to return on the outside. Then you push Marlon Humphrey to the slot. You have 3 strong corners now to play underneath one of the best safeties in the league. So that one from the get-go, no matter what happened on gambling on Marcus Peters, like, was a great trade.
Yeah, it's kind of extra necessary for them to fortify their secondary because they just don't have a great pass rush this year by Ravens standards. And to me, it was a move that, and Marcus Peters can kind of be overexposed as a number 1 corner.
Yeah,
it's a gambling corner. Yes.
Time and again, as a number 3 corner, he can be a massive weapon.
I agree.
So yeah.
One more, Chiefs run defense. Yesterday they gave up 188 yards to Derrick Henry. That was this past Sunday. 5 times in the last 8 weeks, they've given up 180 rushing yards to teams. And in those 8 games, they're 4-4. I am of the opinion that defense does matter, that defense can cripple a team, that especially if you cannot stop the run, which the Chiefs at points this year, and like I mentioned, 5 times in the last 8 games, have been very bad at it, then that can completely dictate the outcome of a contest. And we saw that probably better than ever. Sure, the winning touchdown by Ryan Tannehill was all through the air, basically. But it kind of
played Ryan Tannehill's just made over and over again throughout his career.
But so much of it was establishing Derrick Henry for much of the game.
Which is the way the Titans play, and there are better play callers out there, so if they see, and they will see, how leaky the Chiefs' run defense is, then sure, perhaps they start calling run heavily throughout the rest of the year. That's all the Chiefs face. But do you think it really hinders like a Patrick Mahomes offense and a team that much?
I think it hinders
Super Bowl aspirations.
I think it hinders their Super Bowl aspirations because, again, and we talked about this multiple times this year, but I believe this team self-scouted this offseason and said, hey, we needed to get the ball in overtime in order to get to the Super Bowl. Our defense didn't have those 1, 2, or 3 playmakers in isolation that can take us over the top. Let's get those this offseason. They got those, in their opinion, this offseason, and it's not working so far.
I'd say the Chiefs have gotten kind of unlucky from a roster because
they have gotten very unlucky.
Because the way this team is built is, so the pass defense has actually been ascendant this year and pretty solid, much better than it was last year. They probably built this roster with the assumption they were going to be playing from ahead, every game, all year. And like Patrick Mahomes had an amazing game yesterday.
I agree.
And this weird game flow where they're not ahead by like 10 or 14 points like they were all last season. And so they could probably build their defense with the idea that they would take the opposing team's running game out of it. And the opposing team's running game wouldn't get a chance to ever hashtag establish it. And
I think that's very fair. And it is fair. I'm not so concerned that the Chiefs aren't going to make the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. But this is a team, one of like the 5 or 6 across the league that you can say it's AFC Championship, it's Super Bowl, and that's basically it. Like, that's the goal. And again, we look at complete teams across the league. The Chiefs' offense is still one of, if not the best in the NFL, but there is a glaring fatal flaw right now in these past 8 games, and it's their run defense. Agreed?
Quite bad.
Okay. Before we get into the waivers, again, that's John Daigle's column, let me talk to you about the Rotoworld Season Pass. That is rotoworld.com/win or rotoworld.com/DFS if you're into DFS. And right now, if you use promo code NFL50, you get 50% off both. It gives you like that little boost, a little injection that you need to win and take you over the edge. Again, for the Season Pass, that premium content that you want. rotoworld.com/win, and for DFS, rotoworld.com/DFS, and use promo code NFL50. All right, Daigsy, time for the column. It's up on Rotoworld right now. Let's look at the Falcons' backfield. Devontae Freeman left against the New Orleans Saints, so Brian Hill is inserted, 20 carries for 61 yards, 2 targets, 1 reception, 10 yards.
You're not going to get as favorable game script, as weird game script as that was yesterday against the Saints, but the fact is he still got 21 touches, Brian Hill. Devontae Freeman's getting an MRI as we record this, perhaps could miss an extended period. And if he does, I would imagine Brian Hill is the guy they lean on in the Devontae Freeman role over 80% of their snaps. They didn't use Quadri at all yesterday. Kenyon Barner only played 10 snaps behind Hill's 38 in the interim.
These backs that you're mentioning?
I know. That's
so
their backups.
ludicrous.
That's what they're down to with Ito Smith now out for the season. So, yeah, I think Brian Hill is a stash waiting to explode.
Waiting to explode.
Waiting to explode. I do think Brian Hill is a pretty good player. In a better situation than like Balaj getting all of the snaps.
Sure, but like if that's the mark that you're going with, again, I don't want average football players on bad teams.
He could be waiting to explode for week 11. He had 21 touches. He's going to have a 3-down role against the Panthers defense
that's true.
Not as bad as the Chiefs run defense, but
I just can't get amped.
No, but I understand, but average team is not us. Average team is not us arguing about Mark Walton on the Dolphins, right? Like, you at least can see that one where it's like, hey, he's just a bad
question.
On a bad team.
Do you think Brian Hill right now is better than what Devontae Freeman has shown this year?
Yes.
Okay, so you think he can improve off Devontae Freeman's 41 rushing yards per game, 31 receiving yards per game so far this season?
Yes, and what
so that gets you 72 yards.
What I'm really hinging on is him taking the targets from Devontae Freeman. I don't care about the middling carries, to be honest.
Okay.
I agree with everything John says with the addendum of for week 11.
Maybe explosion was the wrong terminology.
You're trying to sell your column. I understand.
But no, I'm not even trying to sell a column because J.D. McKissick might be ranked higher than him. But what I'm saying is that he is a very good pickup because we're not going to get another Ronald Jones who had issues in himself yesterday with fumbling. But we're not going to. I really don't think we're seeing another back who's getting a majority of the work this year unless it comes down to injuries like this. And the fact is, Freeman's injury may be long term.
He's a plug-and-play RB2.
I told you I started Frank Gore yesterday in a league, 11. Josh. Like, I need some help. I need Brad Hill in my life.
For the second time this season, yesterday against the Saints, and the Saints have a very good defense, and so it was shocking to see that game go in favor of the Falcons so much. The Falcons went over 100 rushing yards, and I know you're not talking about rushing yards here necessarily. You think it's more about passing game. I don't know, man. It's just difficult, even in Week 11, for me to be like, yeah, Brian Hill is someone I definitely want to invest in.
I get it.
Want is a strong word, but someone these are kind of.
You have to?
Yeah, a guy who comes along with a potentially every down role. That's like.
And we still have 2 more weeks of 4-team buys. We got to get through this, Josh. We got to get through the next 2 weeks.
This part of the season, you really shouldn't have any fab left, but I would use a lot of fab on Brian Hill this week.
I know next it's a wide receiver on the list, but since he mentioned J.D. McKissick, hopefully we can go to that one because. Yeah. J.D. McKissick is a name that people might be debating between Brian Hill and between J.D. McKissick. Life comes at you fast here, Daigle. Ty Johnson left with an injury this past Sunday. McKissick against those Chicago Bears. 10 carries for 36 yards. And then the receiving game, whopping 7 targets. Nice 6 receptions. The tune of 19 yards.
Not very nice, but nice. However, what J.D. McKissick did was play the role that we always wanted Kerryon Johnson to play. He got 70% of the snaps. He ran 36 routes to Paul Perkins' 7. He was a true workhorse. And yes, it came with Jeff Driscoll under center, and maybe it's Jeff Driscoll the rest of the season. Who knows with Matthew Stafford's whatever he's dealing with, a broken back, a broken bone, whatever the case. But if Ty Johnson remains out with with concussion syndromes, and we only have J.D. McKissick and Paul Perkins, Nick Baldwin's a fullback. I'm not worried about him at all. So we only have 2 backs in this backfield. This, again, is a better situation than Brian Hill because we can guarantee J.D. McKissick won't lose his pass-catching role no matter what. And J.D. McKissick will likely see 7+ targets if he's their starting running back.
J.D. McKissick is a guy who exists. That's always been my man. When I think of J.D. McKissick, I think of pointless Pete Carroll press conferences. I remember so many.
He's very good third down.
Pete Carroll, J.D. McKissick, random hype sessions. Didn't really do a whole lot for the Seattle Seahawks. But I think Matthew Stafford sounds like maybe he has the Derek Carr, Tony Romo broken back. Just a minor broken back. Well, he'll be back in a week. No, I was saying I think he'll only miss a game or 2.
We discussed David Johnson though, bottom 5 in broken tackle rate this year. J.D. McKissick's top 5 among guys with 30+ carries. Yeah.
I would rather have Brian Hill than J.D. McKissick, just personally.
I don't know. This is not a humble brag, but this year I'm just not having to worry about these low-end running backs.
Well, you're also winning the A-League, and then you have Tevin Coleman, you have a lot of backs. So.
Josh is an elitist.
Let's go to the wide receiver position.
You sound like someone who's never started Trey Edmonds in your life.
No, well, I haven't.
I started Trey Edmonds last week.
I can say that with confidence.
I have to.
Darius Slayton is a rookie wide receiver for the New York Giants. Darius Slayton had an awesome Sunday against the New York Jets. 14 targets. 10 receptions, 121 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We've noticed that Sterling Shepard has been out with concussion-like symptoms for quite some time. Not a stretch to say that Darius Layton has kind of emerged as, if not one of Daniel Jones's favorite targets.
Not a stretch to truly think that Shepard may not play again this year after re-entering concussion protocol Saturday night for the 3rd time this season, this past week. However, Darius Layton now 2 touchdowns in 2 games in 2 of his last 3 games. Just over 6 targets the past month and leads the team in air yards in that time, despite the fact that it's Golden Tate who still leads the team with target share in that span. Even with Evan Ingram back, Darius Slayton is their guy that gets shots 18, 20-plus yards downfield. And so that makes him intriguing. He's more, in my mind, a bye-week filler, however, because he's still a stretch with Daniel Jones. And we talked about Daniel Jones likely prospering because the Jets are not a team, just like the Bucs, just like the Lions, that don't get pressure. And that is when Danny Dime, because he has 10 fumbles in the past month, Danny Dime himself, that's when he struggles the most downfield. However, the fact he gets deep shots, Slayton, that is at least positive in his favor.
Have you heard that people criticize Dave Gettleman for his draft picks? I mean, it has happened every once in a while. I mean, the roller coaster of Daniel Jones winning his first 2 contests and now losing 6 straight. That's kind of pick has gone up and down a little, but I think he's had his moments. I think with Daniel Jones that there's a little too much Jameis Winston in him at times where he fumbles the ball, he throws interceptions.
I watched it last night. That's who he reminds me of. It's Jameis Winston.
He reminds me of Ryan Fitzpatrick.
But to compliment Dave Gettleman here, he has found something in Darius Layton. A late-round pick who looks the part, who is big, who can get down the field, who has a role in this offense immediately. That's difficult to find across the league, and Slayton's really impressive.
Dane Brugler, scouting guy, actually had him top.
Know him.
Actually had you absolutely do. He actually had him top 150, even though he went so late.
Don't believe it.
I got to say a few thoughts. First, I meant Jameis Winston reminds me of Ryan Fitzpatrick, not Daniel Jones. Reminds me of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Real quick, Darius Layton, 4.39 speed, averaged over 20 yards per catch in the SEC. He was a 5th round pick. He was questionable ball skills, but he's.
Was that the mark on him coming out of school?
It was, according to Mr. Evan Silva.
Oh, okay.
Questionable ball skills in the Rotoworld.
Haven't heard of him.
He's only the 4th, per Matthew Berry, only the 4th guy this year, receiver with multiple 2-touchdown games. 14 targets this year. The one problem with Darius Slayton is that they're going on bye this week, and then they're coming out of bye against the Bears. So maybe don't go crazy on the waiver wire.
We'll say the Bears aren't quite the Bears of 2019 or 2018.
But
they're just not having the same turnover marks.
Against Daniel Jones, though?
Yeah, I hear you. They're going to get some turnovers against Daniel Jones. Let's put it that way. O.J. Howard is the name we're going to close this episode with.
Oh, buddy.
He's back. 7 targets, 4 receptions, 47 yards, and a touchdown against the Arizona Cardinals. A lot of it seemed like it came on a single drive. It was his first touchdown of the season. He's been dropped in a lot of leagues.
Yes.
John Daigle should be back in your lineup.
We have a story about that, actually.
Yeah, he may have been dropped in our Rotoworld Deathmatch League with Silva.
And added him and had him go crazy.
Yeah, he may have been dropped by Daigle in the other league. Because we had to reach. We needed some bye-week fillers, buddy. But what happened, he went out with a hamstring injury for a few weeks. And what happened when he came back in this game, a lot of people will look at the production and attribute to the Cardinals defense, which is fair. But 84 of 85 snaps, a season high. Ran a route on 85% of Jameis Winston's dropbacks, a season high.
Jamie Winston.
Did I say that?
You said Jamie Winston.
That's his sister. Season high. 7 targets.
The Texas becomes more and more.
Season high, and then his first target inside the 10 all year. In week 10, Josh, he finally got a target inside the 10 and caught a touchdown with it.
It was on a coverage bust. But,
I cannot imagine the way this offense is schemed. I think Bruce Arians is a good offensive coach, but I don't think he played O.J. Howard across the board at season-high rates because they played the Cardinals. I would like to imagine this is how we project him moving forward as an every-down tight end. And if that is the case, then I'm willing to take those eggs he's going to launch into the sky, most likely, the 2 for 20s and 1 for 7s. That's fine. As long as he plays 95% of the snaps again, I'll take the loss. What we need to talk about, though, is because this week on the waiver wire, the tight end is the big conversation. Darren Fells was dropped. He's now available in over 60% of Yahoo and ESPN leagues. And Darren Fells, as we know, a touchdown machine.
Yep.
Dallas Goedert and Noah Fant also available. So we're going to have to rank all these guys.
Lots of options.
Actually, you don't have to do anything. I have to rank these guys in the waiver wire column. So that's why I mentioned O.J. Howard, because he's one of a handful of people I would stream over T.J. Hawkinson, who's still owned in over 50% of leagues, and I don't understand why. And then Vance McDonald, still owned in like 53% of leagues. Don't know why. Probably because Darty told him to. So.
Hey, I couldn't imagine the quarterback was going to need Tommy John surgery or whatever. That's all I'm going to say
fair.
about Vance McDonald.
Are we good on O.J. Howard? Have we closed the book?
I think we're good.
Are we done with this podcast?
We got to rank them right after this, though. So.
All right, everyone. That does it for us. Again, we'll be back on Thursday and Friday this week with more episodes. Again, go back and listen to that review pod that we did on Sunday night for every game on the Sunday slate. So, for John Daigle, for Patrick Daugherty, I'm Josh Norris. See you ever. Bye-bye.